We are used to the idea that history is a gallery of perfect marble busts. We look at great leaders and pioneers as demigods whose names should inspire awe. But if you step closer to these pedestals, you can smell the rot and old secrets that were hidden behind beautiful legends for decades. Your ideals are often the result of collective amnesia and masterful censorship. Today, we open the second file on 11 idols whose real actions will make you shudder. You respect them for their achievements, but the time has come to learn what price those around them paid for this greatness. Fact 1. Sir Francis Drake is considered a great hero of England, a knight and a favorite of Queen Elizabeth. He is glorified as the man who helped defeat the Spanish Armada and completed a circumnavigation of the globe. In school textbooks, he appears as a noble navigator, but in reality, he was an ordinary state pirate. The Queen was his main sponsor. She provided him with ships, and he robbed Spanish gold fleets and gave her a share. However, piracy was only the tip of the iceberg in his biography. Sir Francis Drake became one of the first English slave traders, making a fortune on the human trade. He was involved in the so-called triangle trade. He bought or kidnapped people in Africa, transported them across the Atlantic in inhuman conditions, and sold them in America. This national hero was a cynical merchant of living cargo whose wealth was literally soaked in the sweat and blood of slaves. Fact 2. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is revered as the savior of the United States from the Great Depression and the leader who defeated Nazism. He is a symbol of the free world and democracy. But there is a dark page in his biography that people do not like to remember at formal receptions. In 1942, Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, which became a death sentence for the civil rights of thousands of people. Under this decree, 120,000 American citizens of Japanese descent were forcibly deported to special internment camps. These people were not spies or criminals. They were ordinary families, the elderly, and children. They lost their homes, their businesses, and their freedom, only because of their ethnic origin. The Democratic leader locked his own citizens in concentration camps in the deserts of Utah and Arizona, just in case. Fact 3. James Cook entered history as a great explorer, scientist, and outstanding cartographer. He is considered the man who gave Australia and the Hawaiian Islands to civilization. But for the indigenous population of these lands, he was the embodiment of cruelty and arrogance. Cook did not seek a dialogue with the natives. He established his order using cannons and punitive expeditions. For any minor theft, even if an ordinary nail went missing, Cook gave the order to burn entire villages or destroy the boats of local residents. His signature style was taking chiefs hostage for ransom. Additionally, Cook's crew brought a whole bouquet of European diseases to the islands, to which the local residents had no immunity. These infections wiped out up to 90% of the population of Polynesia, turning the discovery of new lands into a massive biological catastrophe. Fact 4. Charles Lindbergh was an idol of the 1920s, an American national hero, and the first person to fly across the Atlantic alone. He was called the Lucky Lindy and considered a symbol of progress. But in the 1930s, this symbol fell in love with Nazi ideology. Lindbergh frequently visited Berlin, openly admired Goering and the power of the Luftwaffe. In 1938, he personally received a medal from Hitler, which he was very proud of. When World War II began, Lindbergh became the face of the America First movement. He actively campaigned against military aid to the Allies and argued that the United States should not enter the conflict with Germany. He believed in the ideas of Aryan superiority and thought that America should not protect other nations. The nation's idol voluntarily chose the side of evil and became a tool of enemy propaganda at the most critical moment in world history. Fact 5. Voltaire is considered the father of the Enlightenment and the main fighter for tolerance and freedom of speech. His phrase about being ready to die for an opponent right to express their opinion became a classic of humanism. However, upon closer inspection, it turns out that the philosopher protected freedom primarily for himself. Voltaire was an extremely aggressive anti-Semite, even by the standards of the 18th century. Furthermore, the genius of the Enlightenment was a very calculating businessman. He invested significant funds in the French East India Company, which at that time was actively engaged in the international slave trade. While the philosopher wrote lofty treatises on equality and brotherhood, he received substantial dividends from the sale of people. His estate and the comfortable life of a human rights fighter were built on the interest from the most shameful business in history. Fact 6. John F. Kennedy remains in the memory of millions as the perfect president of Camelot, a young, handsome, and charismatic leader with a flawless family. But behind the scenes of the White House, a completely different reality was hidden. Kennedy was a seriously ill man, suffering from Addison disease. To hide excruciating back pain and project energy, he was on a dangerous cocktail of steroids and painkillers, which were injected by a personal doctor nicknamed Dr. Feelgood. Additionally, the image of the perfect family man was a complete lie. The president cheated on his wife almost daily, arranging meetings with mistresses right in the Oval Office. One of them was Judith Exner, who was simultaneously the girlfriend of mafia boss Sam Giancana. Kennedy consciously risked national security by engaging with women connected to organized crime while the country was in the state of the Cold War. Fact 7. Elvis Presley is still considered the king of rock and roll and the main symbol of the American dream. But his private life hides facts that today would be called a gross violation of the law. Elvis met his future wife, Priscilla, when he was 24 years old, and she was only 14 years old. He was serving as a soldier in Germany and was already a world star when he began dating a child. He convinced her parents to move the girl to him at the Graceland estate in the U.S. when she was only 17 years old. For 8 years, he literally raised her to suit his tastes, dictating what makeup to wear, what clothes to put on, and how to behave. He openly said that he chose her because he could completely mold her in his own image. This was not a beautiful love story, but a classic example of psychological control and gross manipulation of a young person. Fact 8. Mahatma Gandhi is revered as a great soul and a symbol of the non-violent struggle for peace. He is considered a spiritual teacher whose life was an example of purity. However, there are dark spots in the saint biography. During his time in South Africa, Gandhi showed himself to be a staunch racist. He openly wrote that black Africans were savages and animals who stood infinitely lower than Indians. At the age of 70, the national hero began practicing highly questionable experiments with his celibacy. He forced young women, including his 18-year-old grandniece, to sleep in the same bed with him, naked. Gandhi claimed that this was the highest test of his will and spiritual purity. However, from the outside, these practices looked like an outright use of his status to satisfy strange personal fantasies under the cover of religion. Fact 9. Alfred Hitchcock is considered a genius of cinema and a master of suspense, who created masterpieces of world cinematography. But behind the scenes, he was a real predator and abuser. Hitchcock was obsessed with his actresses, especially blondes, whom he turned into his slaves. Tippi Hedren, the star of the movie The Birds, had it worst of all. The director controlled her diet, her clothes, and her social circle, demanding total submission. When the actress finally stood her ground and refused his indecent proposals, Hitchcock flew into a rage and methodically destroyed her career. He kept her on a restrictive contract, paid her pennies, and forbade her from filming with other directors until the contract term expired. The master of horrors on the screen turned out to be a master of psychological terror in real life, who enjoyed power over the fates of defenseless women. Fact 10. Marlon Brando is recognized as the greatest actor of his century and the godfather of Hollywood, but off-screen, he was an emotional tyrant whose cruelty destroyed the lives of his loved ones. Brando had 11 children by different women, many of whom he practically ignored. He considered the expression of fatherly feelings a weakness and played the genius at the expense of his family suffering. This coldness led to a series of terrible tragedies. His son Christian, in an attempt to earn his father's attention, shot the boyfriend of his half-sister Cheyenne. Christian ended up in prison, and Cheyenne, who suffered from deep depression due to the lack of her father's love, committed suicide a few years later. The great actor continued to play his best roles, while his real family fell to pieces from his own indifference. Fact 11. Charles Dickens entered history as the main defender of the disadvantaged and the voice of the poor. His Oliver Twist and A Christmas Carol taught generations of people kindness and compassion. But in real life, this kind Father Christmas was a man of rare cruelty toward his wife Catherine. After 20 years of marriage and the birth of 10 children, Dickens decided that his wife had become too boring and unattractive for him. At the age of 45, he started an affair with an 18-year-old actress, and he literally destroyed his wife morally. He kicked her out of the house, took away almost all the children, and forbade them from communicating with their mother. To save his reputation as a holy defender of morality, Dickens published a letter in the newspapers where he publicly accused Catherine of being insane and a bad mother. The hero, who taught the world compassion, cynically trampled the mother of his children for the sake of a new fling and maintaining a clean image.